night was thick with an oppressive darkness as I cruised the deserted streets of Redwood Falls. I'd been on the force for over a decade, but nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited me on that fateful evening. It all began with a routine call about a disturbance at the old Miller House, a dilapidated mansion that had stood empty for decades. The locals whispered of dark secrets hidden within its walls, but I paid them little mind as I pulled up to the crumbling estate. The front door creaked open on rusty hinges as I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the gloom like a beacon in the night. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and decay, and I felt a shiver run down my spine as I made my way through the abandoned rooms. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon the source of the disturbance, a group of teenagers huddled together in the dim light of a flickering candle. They claimed to have heard strange noises coming from the basement, but as I descended into the darkness, I quickly realized that something far more sinister was at play. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick with a sense of foreboding that seemed to press down on me from all sides. I could hear whispers echoing off the walls, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. As I rounded a corner, my flashlight caught sight of something that froze the blood in my veins. A figure crouched in the shadows, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, a twisted creature that seemed to flicker in and out of existence like a specter from another world. I raised my gun, my hands trembling with fear as I demanded the figure to show itself. But before I could react, it lunged forward with inhuman speed, its razor-sharp claws slicing through the air with a sickening sound. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest as I struggled to regain my composure. But the creature was relentless, its unearthly howls filling the air as it closed in on me with unnatural speed. In a panic, I fired my gun, the deafening roar echoing through the basement like a thunderclap. But the bullet seemed to pass right through the creature, leaving it unharmed as it bore down on me with unstoppable force. Just when all hope seemed lost, I heard a voice from the darkness, a voice I recognized all too well. It was the voice of my partner, Detective Daniels, calling out to me from the shadows.
I've seen things in my time as a priest that would make even the bravest souls quiver in fear. But none of those experiences could have prepared me for the horror that unfolded on that cold, moonless night in the small town of St. Jude's. It began innocently enough, with a call from the local parish about a family in distress. The Johnsons were devout members of our congregation, pillars of the community, but something had changed within their household. They spoke of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, whispers in the dead of night, and a sense of overwhelming dread that seemed to permeate every corner of their home. As I arrived at the Johnson residence, I could feel the weight of unease settling over me like a suffocating blanket. The air was thick with an otherworldly chill, and I could sense a presence lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. The family welcomed me into their home with tear-streaked faces, their eyes haunted by the terror that had consumed their lives. They led me to the bedroom of their youngest daughter, Emily, where the disturbances had been most pronounced. Emily lay on her bed, her body contorted in unnatural angles, her eyes staring blankly into the abyss. Her parents spoke of fits of rage and violence, of voices that spoke in tongues unknown, and of a darkness that seemed to consume their daughter from within. As I approached Emily's bedside, I could feel the presence growing stronger, its malevolent energy radiating from every corner of the room. I knew then that this was no ordinary case of possession. It was something far more sinister, something that had been festering in the shadows for far too long. With a prayer on my lips and a crucifix in hand, I began the exorcism ritual, calling upon the divine to banish the darkness that had taken root within Emily's soul. But as I spoke the words of power, I could feel a resistance unlike anything I had ever encountered before. The room seemed to come alive with a cacophony of screams and whispers, the very walls pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Emily thrashed and writhed on the bed, her voice a guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. I pressed on, my faith guiding me through the darkness as I battled against forces beyond my comprehension. But with each passing moment, I could feel the darkness closing in, threatening to consume us all in its unholy embrace. And then, just when all hope seemed lost, a blinding light filled the room, banishing the shadows and casting out the darkness that had plagued us for so long. Emily's body went limp, her breathing steady and calm once more. As I looked into her eyes, I could see a glimmer of something familiar, something human. The darkness had been vanquished, but its echoes would linger on in the recesses of my mind, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of our reality. The Johnson family thanked me profusely for my help, their gratitude a balm to my weary soul. But as I left their home and stepped out into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered in the shadows, watching and waiting for its chance to strike once more. And though I may never fully understand the true nature of the darkness that had consumed Emily, one thing is certain: the battle against evil is far from over, and I will continue to stand against it with unwavering resolve, no matter the cost.
I've been a nurse for over a decade, and I thought I had seen it all, until I met the patient in room 333. It was a quiet night at St. Agnes Hospital, the kind of night where time seemed to stretch on endlessly, punctuated only by the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional shuffle of footsteps in the hallway. I had just finished my rounds and was preparing to settle in for a long night shift when the call came in: a new admission to room 333. The patient's name was Mr. Johnson, an elderly man with no known medical history. But as I would soon discover, there was more to Mr. Johnson than met the eye. As I entered the room, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of unease. The air seemed to crackle with an electric energy, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I approached Mr. Johnson's bedside. He lay there, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his expression blank and unreadable. But there was something about him, something unsettling, like a shadow lurking just beneath the surface. I began my assessment, checking his vital signs and asking him a series of routine questions. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Johnson was hiding something dark and sinister that lurked just beyond the edge of my perception. As the night wore on, strange things began to happen in room 333. Objects would move on their own, and I would catch fleeting glimpses of figures darting in and out of the shadows. But whenever I looked, there was nothing there, just empty space and the faint echo of laughter in the air. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination running wild, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger with each passing moment. And then, one night, I witnessed something that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I had just finished administering Mr. Johnson's medication when he suddenly sat bolt upright in bed, his eyes wide with terror. He began to speak in a voice that was not his own, his words twisted and garbled like the ravings of a madman. I tried to calm him, but he seemed to be in the grip of some unseen force, his body contorting in unnatural angles as he screamed and thrashed against his restraints. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Mr. Johnson lay back on the bed, his eyes closed and his breathing steady once more. I was shaken to the core, but I knew I had to do something, anything, to help Mr. Johnson break free from whatever dark force had taken hold of him. I delved into his medical records, searching for any clue that might explain his bizarre behavior. What I found chilled me to the bone. Mr. Johnson had a history of mental illness, including episodes of psychosis and hallucinations. But there was something else, something hidden deep within the pages of his file that sent a shiver down my spine. Buried among the medical jargon and clinical notes was a single line that made my blood run cold. Patient reported seeing shadows moving in the corners of his room, accompanied by whispers in the dead of night. I knew then that Mr. Johnson was not suffering from a mere mental illness. He was being tormented by something far more sinister, something that defied explanation and lurked just beyond the reach of our understanding. I wish I could say that we were able to save Mr. Johnson, that we were able to break the hold that the darkness had over him. But the truth is far more terrifying. Mr. Johnson disappeared from room 333 one night. leaving behind nothing but an empty bed and the faint echo of his screams in the air. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, something that lingers in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And though I may never know the true nature of the darkness that haunted room 333, one thing is certain: its whispers will haunt me until the end of my days,